Welcome everybody, buonasera a tutti, benvenuti all'Istituto Italiano di Cultura. This is the second Italian Design Day. The first one was last year, and we had here Mitsuko Deluxe. The Italian Design Day is an initiative of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and here in New York it is organized by the Institute and by the Consulate of Italy in New York. So first of all, I would like to ask Francesco Genuardi, Consul General of Italy in New York, to say some words about this initiative that we do together. And I had to thank him because he is able to be here after a very hard work about the election in Italy. And as you know, we could vote also here in New York. Please, Francesco Genuardi.
Grazie, Direttore. Thank you. Buonasera a tutti. Good evening, everybody. And happy Italian Design Day, everybody. The Italian Design Day is 2 years old, is very much alive and kicking, and it's a pleasure, a privilege to host the second edition here in New York City. Italian design means beauty, means talent, creativity, means a lot for our country, but it means a lot for our country in this very special city. New York City is still a huge point of reference for all designers in the world, for the design itself, I think. And also for Italian design, just think about the fact that the subway map is by an Italian designer, Massimo Vignelli. Just think about the senior MOMA curator, who is Paola Antonelli, and she's here. I'm very happy that you are here. I really thank Giorgio Van Straten, director, because congratulations, you have chosen a fantastic ambassador of Italian design, Mario Cucinella, a very famous architect, expert on sustainability, which is one of the main issues of the future and the present times, in conversation with Paola Antonelli. So I think it will be a fantastic conversation, a fantastic night. I wish you an excellent and fabulous Italian Design Day. Grazie a tutti.
Yes, as Consul General said, the topic, the theme of this year is sustainability. And when I knew that this is the theme, I thought that Mario Cucinella and Paola Antonelli are perfect for a conversation about this topic, because the both of them in different field and with different way work a lot about this theme. But I'm very happy to have Mario and Paola here, also because Mario is the curator of the Italian Pavilion in the next Venice Biennale, Architecture Venice Biennale, and I know that also in this exposition, the theme of sustainability is very important, and also because Paola Antonelli is the curator of the next Triennale di Milano about design. The exhibition will be in 2019, and I think that also in this exhibition the theme of sustainability is a main issue. I just had some words about Paola Antonelli and Mario Cucinella. Paola Antonelli is senior curator in the Department of Architecture and Design of Museum of Modern Art, where she has worked since 1994. From 1991 to 1993, she was a lecturer at the University of California and has also taught design, history, and theory at the Harvard Graduate School of Design and at MFA program of the School of Visual Art in New York. Paola is a contributing editor for Domus magazine from 1986 1987 to 1991, and an editor of Abitare. Paola is also the author of many exhibition catalogs and several titles dedicated to design. The recipient of the master degree in architecture from the Polytechnic of Milan in 1990, Paola Antonelli is a senior fellow with the Royal College of Art and received an honorary doctorate in design from Kingston University in London and from the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. She also earned the Design Mind Smithsonian Institution National Design Award in October 2006, and in 2007 she was named one of the 25 most incisive design visionaries by Time magazine. Mario Cucinella is an Italian architect. He's among the most important architects practicing in Europe today, with multiple award-winning international design projects. Not only is Cucinella's work lauded for design excellence, but he is an undisputed global leader in sustainable practices ranging from individual residences to urban master plans. The impact and significance of his work, both social and environmental, achieved in his role as an architect, educator, and in service have been recognized worldwide, and most recently, 2016, by the Royal Institute of British Architects, who bestowed upon him the prestigious International Fellowship. In 2017, the American Institute of Architects awarded him with the prestigious Honorary Fellowship. For the 2018 Venice Biennale, Mario Cucinella will be the curator of the Italian Pavilion. I also want to thank Ala Tannier, who is the assistant of Paola Antonelli in the project for the Triennale di Milano, because she accepted to moderate this event, because the person we asked for it at the last moment said to us that she's not able to be here, and so I thank a lot Ala Tannier, who accepted to moderate the evening. So welcome Mario Cucinella and Paola Antonelli. Enjoy.
Good. Well, maybe if we switch off some light. No. Okay. Well, thank you for this invitation. I think it's a great opportunity to spread the culture of design of Italy around the world, and especially in New York. Thanks for these opportunities. And well, sustainability is the main issue, I know, and of course architecture is one of the major problems we're facing now in the near future. So I would like to show you some very short videos, only 2 minutes, and then explaining part of my work. So, just to make some statement about this definition of sustainability, which is actually quite difficult, but I just quoted this phrase of Hemingway, you know, we must get used to the idea at the most important crossroad of life, there's no signage. So it's mean that's happen every day, you know, make a choice. You know? But I think we don't have anymore any choice, you know, and I'm looking at this is the roadmap of sustainability from, I'm starting from 1992, which is the climate change conference in Rio de Janeiro. So in the last 21 years, every year there was a conference of climate change, but also government, you know, like in Europe, in the United States, other countries, they try to make more and more regulation to make better buildings, you know, and that's mean increasing the performance in buildings, not only a technical issue, it's a design issue. So, and then if you look in that 2020, 2030, and 2050, so that's what we're facing is not, there's no possibility, there's not two ways, there's only one way, and that's what we're going to do. But I just want to come back to a little story that why Europe is so concentrating on sustainability and why we do this European roadmap. I don't know if you know the story of Monte Verità. It was a community in close to the Ticino, so in the northwest of Italy. At that time, you know, there was a period of time where Industrial Revolution in Europe started. You know, it's a very, very intense period, but a community of vegetarian and naturalist and philosopher and theosophists. So they created a community in the heart of the north of Italy and based on back to the life of nature. So that's in some way is the roots where we come from. And that story starts in the beginning of the century. You know? And I was very fascinating if you get time to read about this group, the combining hearts and vision of sustainability at that time. And there was, you know, people nudist and using only natural clothes, only eating vegetarian, and you know, get a sort of a behaviors, you know, in relation with nature. No? But then, after many years, that's what European give to us. You know, European frameworks for climate and energy policy is a little bit dry, you know, like minus 40% of CO2 emission. And 27% of more renewable energy, and reducing energy consumption, and in buildings, you know, next year, in 2 years' time, we need to design building with this definition of net zero, so nearly zero energy building. So which mean change completely the culture of the design. So because to design building like this, you need to change your knowledge and your tools of work. So that's why we did in the office, we created this school called SOS, School of Sustainability. Is really related to what happens now. No, is we're facing an incredible challenge in environment. For architects, it's very, very important to change the spirits and mind. No? So we built this school, and we have 15 students every year dedicating to creating for them a knowledge of sustainability, vision, and technical issue, but also vision. Because I think there's a lot of ambition. We all have a very high ambition to design a better world. But between the ambition and reality, the gap is still very, very big. You know? So that's what I'm, this little sketch to see, these bubbles are the ambition. You know? Educations and developers, professionals and economies, they all have ambition to creating a better world, more sustainable, which is difficult to say what this means, but sometimes this area, they are overlapping. So ambitions and direction and design, they all go together, and that's the area where we are working with our clients. So where there's more intense ideas to go in the direction of sustainability. So this is few projects we are now doing in Milan, which is Milan in the moment is really the heart of Italy. So everything's happening in Milan almost, you know, especially for architects. So for many, many years it was difficult. Now for many reasons the economy is growing up again. So we do this tower for a company called Unipol. It's the second large insurance company in Italy. And it's complete one of the most new area of Milan, the city center, with a sort of a business center. No? So some few sketches and the tower. So it's now the moment in Milan we all discuss about making more towers. So and there are a few already done, and this will be the last one on this area. But the most interesting thing is design the towers. I mean, it's an efficient buildings, you know. But what we did is creating an opportunity for the building to creating a very large atrium, and this atrium is actually the climate moderator of the building. So, and because facing south, this area is empty. It's like a very like 20 stores empty atrium. In this part of the building is all the exchange of temperature between the summer and the winter time. But this is working well in technical point of view, but the space we're creating in this should be a large garden, vertical garden inside of the buildings, protect the building from the south face, from the sun, and then creating also a common space. And then where the part of the office is looking through that garden and looking on south. And of course the top of the building, because top of the building is important because you're fighting against gravity for 23 floors. Just building this building against the weight of the building. And then in the top is here is a beautiful garden, and this showing that we can do that area. We know any air conditioning, there's no machine, it's only working as a glass house. So the system of ventilation and protection make this area perfect to stay. There's different strategies, and that is the space. So, but as I always say, buildings are not only the perimeter of the building, is how much the building able to creating a public space, how much the building able to creating relationship. So in this case, if you know Milan, this is the only area of this podium touch the Melchiorre Gioia, so the main street, and then is the first, is the piazza on the street, on the city level, to go inside of the space. Then we did 2 years ago, after the earthquake. Italy is facing a lot of problems in the last few years, I mean, for many years, but I'd say in the last 5 years, there was one big earthquake in Emilia-Romagna, and then 2 years ago was another one in the center of Italy. And we rebuilt a kindergarten. But there is something interesting to know that we may be missing sometime when we design kindergarten. And the student learning more in a well-designed classroom. So it seems quite simple, no? And light, color, shape, all these elements is a positive impact. Design have a positive impact on the learning process. No? But more interesting also is the comfort. So better comfort condition, better learning. So if you think about your school, I was thinking my school when I went, I'm not sure that all this element is part of the design. And then when I start to the design, it comes back to my mind with my kindergarten, 1964. I said, why I remember my kindergarten? So then discovery, then this kindergarten was done by Giuseppe Vaccaro, who is a modernist architect, and he's designing this very social housing area in Piacenza. This little kindergarten, and I was maybe one of these kids. And 2 classrooms full of sun, this 2 classrooms, it's full of sun, and a little garden with like 2 arms, take the kids close. But the walls are very small because you are small. So after many years, and this is taken at that time, and this is now, and I thought, buildings is always part of our experience. So the building doesn't move, of course, but they travel in the memory. It remain in your memory forever. The experience you had. So design building for kids is you need to be very careful, because they're going to bring that experience, good or bad, for their life. So I started to design this building thinking about Pinocchio, and You know, the Pinocchio is one of the most sad story. I don't know why they teach it to kids, because it's very sad and very dramatic, no? And the story is that Pinocchio was, and Geppetto was eaten by a shark or a whale, no? And they were lost for 2 years inside of the belly of the animals. No? You can imagine a kid thinking 2 years inside of a belside. But then Pinocchio finds his father after 2 years. Blah, blah, blah. The story is very, very, very nice. And from that is, I thought that this kindergarten is like the womb of a mother. No, it's also protect yourself. No, from that we designed this. You know? And it was very, very simple things, but buildings as the first level of education, especially school buildings, before the pedagogy. Is the way you leave the building, is it tell you something already, no? If it's good, if it's good light, if you're feeling good. And environmental security, because as you know, kids, they want to discover the world by using hands, of course, but also tongue, no? They lick everything, no? So you need to be sure that you design things, then it's safe, no? So all these things together, no? And this is the landscape of the Pianura Padana, no? That's why the buildings repeat like this. And then there's the laboratory, and the experience for that is the kids start to play with the building instead to play with the toy, you know? So it's really part of the story of the building, no? And that is the way from the night, no? And then also there are small projects, but it's interesting because after the earthquake, especially in Emilia-Romagna, the opportunity is not to make big buildings, but to complete something missing. Like this is a house of music close to high school for music with no rooms for music. Now this is a little bit a paradox. Huh? So I say, maybe we do the rooms so that they can play tools. And we did inspiring by the plane, by this. This is the house. Every cylinder is an instrument. So is a drums, is a piano, is a guitar. And it was a process quite interesting because when we did that building, there was nothing around. I was in the area of really, you know, abandoned area. And then the neighborhood say, well, we cannot keep in that facade our building so bad. So they repainted. And the city also, oh, maybe we can put some grass, and they finish it. So, and smaller, and slowly they're renovating all the areas. So, with our president opening that last year in May. And always when you design building for like schools and the community, they are so happy, they're all there, you know, the families, kids, and everybody. You know, they want to take this in charge, you know? And that's on the night. And then we are working now in a very interesting museum in Milan for a collection, private collection of vase of Etrurian art of the 5th century before Christ. So it's mainly black vase, dark vase. It's an evolution of the Etrurian terracotta work. And his collection, including this, is one of the most important pieces in bronze from the Etrurian arts. So using an existing building in Corso Venezia, is the history of Milan is many house made a museum. No? So it's different levels. And then in underground, we designed this underground museum because, you know, the reference is Cerveteri. This is the only architectural remain from Etruria, you know, because it was all in wood. The only thing is the tomb. You know? This is in earth. And mainly the production of vase is for the dead people, you know, bringing people to another life, you know, and then they give all this present. So the tomb are full of artisan work because they was helping people to this second trip to another life. So we designed this underground museum, like 3 domes together, you know, and all in stones. And you're really going to find it like a big mystery place. You know, you go down on the ground floor to -1, and you just walk inside of this stone museum. Discovery underground place. There's a 700 vase in the exposing. So the challenge is, you know, archaeological museums are very boring. No, everybody know that. You go after 10 bars, you just say, okay, that's enough. Because archaeological museums are not made for people, it's made by archaeological people, so you cannot understand everything. So the shape and the architecture is very important to make the space very exciting. So, and then this is the prototype we made in scale 1:1 to show to the client. And we're now testing all the lighting system, all the vase, because putting light on the black vase is a really big problem. You know, because everything you put on is reflecting or absorbed. So that is the space. So that will be finished next year at this time. But then also we do a very interesting project, especially in this day, what happened in Syria. We're working with Betty Williams, Nobel Prize in 1976. She had a foundation called Città della Pace. She built a little house for family with kids coming from refugees with little kids. So because many of these kids came from the war and they never see peace. Like kids of 7 years or 6 years come from some area that's never been in peace. So we built this little house in the Scanzano Ionica on the Basilicata on the south, thanks to 2 donors, Mr. Natuzzi, Natuzzi Divani, and Benedetto is another guy from industry. And we do this little house, which actually we open on the 24th of March, so next month. And it's built with all natural elements in a very beautiful area, because we're facing the ideas and bringing families, the kids, in a very peaceful place is a way to help them to pass, this very terrible moment. And this, of course, there's a little money as usual, and it's a very simple, very efficient, and this roof is really made to give a very strong character to this place. In the same time, shading the building, and protect from the sun, and create this sort of little community building. And I've just come back. I just arrived yesterday from Vienna, where we did win this competition for 2 large towers. So we do scaling project very different, and this is in Vienna, in the Prater Park. It's a very large building for residential and offices, and it's the ideas of this city is layers, layers of floors, and green going up, because the Prater, the big park, is very close, and creating also space, common space between floors. So there's not only private, but there's some common space, facing this big park. So you see, there's many different things. But I want to tell you a little story just to finish my presentation about this strange idea of sustainability, because we are not talking sustainability for centuries, because it was the point was not there. Everybody was working, but I am saying in an empathic way with the environment. And now we've broken this relationship, and now we try to find a way to rebuild this relationship. But just to tell you a little story, how much people in the past was strong related to the environment. This is Marco Polo's story. Marco Polo is the guy who started in Venice, go to China, but then crossing desert in Persia. And people in Persia, because they never saw a guy from Venice, from Europe, in sign of welcome, they give him an ice cream. So 1273, how the Persian people make an ice cream in the desert? So they did that by building a building. So it's a huge building with there's a tank in the middle and a big wall on the side. So what's happened? This existing, few still existing, but in time they bombing everything between Iran and Iraq. They destroyed everything. So what happens? So they make a big tank and a dome, and then a big wall. Behind the wall there was a little pool, a few centimeters, and they put water. The water is very, very important. In the middle desert, to find the water. They put the water because it's a very shallow pool, and by the effect of the sky is minus 55 degrees. When you fly, and the captain said the outside temperature is minus 55, so the dome, the sky is minus 55, so for the effect of the radiation of the sky, this shallow water was freezing every night, layers by layers. No? They're putting on the tank every night layers of ice. No? And after, you can see the dimension of the tank, you see the little man. So the people from Persia, that's the architecture, was able to make, we know energy only by knowledge. Maybe they take 300 years to understand this relation, a physical relationship. But they was able, in the middle of the desert, to make a building, transforming water in ice, and when it was too hot, they have an ice cream. So I think that's showing the capacity of people to understand this relationship. We have completely lost that knowledge. No? And that's what I'm thinking, and I'm just finish my presentation. What I'm thinking, I think in the last century we lost that knowledge because we divide the competence between architecture and engineer. Architects start to be architects, and the contents of architecture were lost by, and the engineering do that. So architects, they are not anymore connected to the buildings, you know, how the physics of the building, how the building works, how the building is related to the climate, how we can find this relationship. So I think, for me, sustainability is rebuild this bridge of knowledge and then make a new generation of building. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Paola Antonelli, and as you heard before, I work here at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, but I'm lucky enough that I'm going to be the curator for the Triennale of Milan next year. As Mario said, one of the biggest problems is the separation amongst disciplines and the fact that disciplines are kept separated also by practice. And building bridges is extremely important, and it's even more important because we have something quite important to deal with, which is our survival as a human species. Of course, it's not going to happen in our generation, it's not going to happen even with our children or the children of our children, but as human beings we have a very dramatic limitation. We're not able to think more than maybe 80 years away from us. So having a longer perspective is something that we try and we strive for in architecture, in design, and in many other disciplines. Broken Nature is the title of the next Triennale of Milan next year. And the idea is exactly that, trying to have a long-term view of our existence on Earth. You might have heard recently that thanks to a new technology, an incredible number of ruins were found from the Mayan civilizations in northern Guatemala. Now, the Mayan civilization, interestingly, became extinct over a period of several hundred years, very slowly, and so happened for 4 of the great extinction on Earth. It's only one time that the extinction was sudden because of a meteorite, and that's dinosaurs. All the other extinction happened over centuries, a little bit like boiling frogs. Nobody even noticed, or noticed only when it was too late. I have a feeling that that's what's going on even now, and I'm not the only one to think so. But I believe also that there's a way to design a better ending for the human species so that the next species will think of us not as complete idiots, but maybe with a certain elegance and with a certain longing. So it's really a responsibility to try and think more long term. And I really like this phrase by Félix Guattari: without modifications to the social and material environment, there can be no change in mentalities. And without the change in mentalities, we cannot take the right attitudes towards the environment and towards nature. It's about really changing behaviors. It's not only about legislating, but it's about really creating a groundswell of new behaviors that become a design of a new type of life. To think in long terms, there are many different studies that are happening, and I'm going to show you some. Rachel Sussman is an artist that's gone around the world looking for the oldest living beings, and they tend to be lichens and moss in various parts of the world. That beautiful plant, that beautiful moss is from the Atacama Desert in Chile, and instead this is an old cedar tree from Japan. It's beautiful to know that there are beings that have existed for more than 2,000 years on Earth. Another beautiful project. Maybe could I also have the lights down a little bit? Yeah, great, great, great. Thank you. Perfect. Another very beautiful project is the project by Stuart Brand. Stuart Brand, you might know about it. He did the Good Earth catalog in California in the 1960s. And right now he's doing this project called De-Extinction. He's trying to bring back extinct species, but we're not talking about Jurassic Park. He's trying to bring back very intimate and kind of almost irrelevant species that can create a new ecosystem, like the passenger pigeon that used to be the most widespread bird in the United States, in North America at the beginning of the 20th century, and is now completely extinct. And the insects that it used to eat were actually insects that are right now running amok and ruining a lot of crops. So it's about really thinking in long term and trying to think of how we live and designing for that. Mario was talking about the separation between engineering and architecture. Well, the separation exists between design, engineering, art, and science that are considered disciplines that are separate and sometimes come together in a Venn diagram where magically there's an area where they all overlap, and that's the beautiful area. In truth, the system should be different, and there is this beautiful scheme by Neri Oxman, who is a fabulous architect and engineer up at MIT, that talks instead about a metabolic circle. So instead of having art, science, design, and engineering separate, they all feed each other. They all really inform each other. So design and engineering and science and art are together working in a cycle of metabolism of knowledge and metabolism of the built environment. There's much more than can be read in this scheme, and you can find it yourself and really look at the whole complex description. But it really shows a different way of thinking about designing the world and also about inhabiting the world. The next Triennale, which will open exactly a year from now, March 1st, 2019, will bring together in this kind of metabolic circle many different disciplines that are manifestations of the same constructive attitude. I was taught design and architecture at the Polytechnic of Milan at a time where there was no way to do anything practical because we were 15,000 students, but theory was really strong. So I was taught that there is one design that can be then applied to various scales and various fields, of course, with a lot of knowledge that comes to play. It's not all immediate, but I consider architecture a part of design, and interior architecture, speculative design, interface design. They all belong together. Of course, they take separate routes when it comes to specialization, but they can be brought together in a Triennale that really thinks about the world as a whole. And they can be intersected, and they can be then informed by all other disciplines, from philosophy to statistics and even diplomacy. So it's an attempt to really look at the human activity and design activity in particular in a holistic way. Of course, when one thinks about the whole environment and about trying to repair some of the threads that we have broken with nature, one of the most immediate ways to think about it is to think of saving energy and alternative types of energy. So of course, right now, we're in the phase of research, and we are looking at all types of solar energy and wind energy, and we're looking at very interesting designs of solar plants. Of course, right now, many companies are being inspired by ancient Inca sculptures, earth sculptures, to make these solar plants, like the Disney solar plant in Orlando, Florida, or even this Chinese solar plant. It's quite funny what people do. But there are many different ways to think of saving energy that are not only about windmills or solar plants. I've always been fascinated by the work of Philippe Ram. Some of you who might have been at the Biennale of Architecture might have seen his work before. He works thinking of climate that can be not only planetary climate, but also the climate inside a home, and actually builds spaces around different conditions that already might exist. For instance, the exposure of a corner of the house that makes that particular corner colder. It's an interesting maximization of energy that already exists and the attempt to build a space around it. Similarly, the work of Young Architects program, which is a yearly program that we have at MOMA PS1, speaks a lot towards different strategies of preserving energy or of dealing with the environment. On the left-hand side, you see the work of Work Architecture. A few years ago, it was a classical ceiling, a roof garden for vegetables. And instead, on the right-hand side, it was called Wendy. I like the fact that this building, this structure had a name. And Wendy was coated. It had a maximized surface that was then coated with a paint that was supposed to purify the air around it. So the idea of having different strategies to also have a cleaner air can happen at the scale of architecture, as can happen at the scale of the human face. Zijun Wang is a young designer from China that makes the kind of masks that many in China have to use because of pollution, but he makes them out of very expensive sneakers. And he's become like a mania for so many kids in China and abroad. And sometimes, you know, as they say in the United States, when you have lemons, you make lemonade. So there are so many strategies that are about survival in conditions that are not optimal that become also strategies of elegance. And elegance is a form of respect towards other human beings. You know, we're not talking about prettiness, but just the formal intention that makes design really interesting design. Other strategies are about saving energy. I really like this series of Wonder Water cafes that curator Jane Withers organized in the past few years. This one in particular was in Beijing, in Dashilar. And it was a cafe where the menu carried the water footprint of every single food that was offered. And you know, awareness, just letting people know what the implications are of our actions, is already a step in the right direction without becoming too sanctimonious and too repetitive or too annoying. But still, it's about knowing what the impact that we have on Earth is. Another strategy for repairing these threads towards nature is to also think of ancient practices and where materials are sourced from. Forma Fantasma are two wonderful Italian designers that work in Amsterdam, and their practice has become really exemplary for so many younger designers of where the direction that so much design should go. On the left-hand side, you see a project that was called Botanica. It was sponsored by Plart, which is a foundation that studies resins and plastics, and they kind of rediscovered pre-oil era resins that existed before oil became, and hydrocarbons before became the center of our universe. So they're made of like straw and honey wax and shellac, and they are recuperating them for everyday objects. On the right-hand side, instead, they're trying to recycle electronic objects that provoke so much of the waste in our Western world into furniture and other objects that can be reintegrated in our domestic environment. Beautiful is also the attempt by so many different design studios in Europe to involve and connect people that don't usually have work, that don't have jobs immediately, to a productive environment. I don't know how many of you know the Autoprogettazione project by Enzo Mari. It was a wonderful subversive manual book from 1974 that tried to demystify the idea that design is only led by great genius designers, and instead gave to everyone in the world the power to make their own furniture by showing very precise instructions. In Berlin, a very interesting group of students gave these Autoprogettazione books to refugees from different parts of the world, and they created a store where the Autoprogettazione furniture is sold, made by refugees. Something similar is happening in the Netherlands. It's called Social Label. It's a group, a collective of designers that deploy and employ refugees to make beautiful objects that are then for sale in a store. This idea of fixing has become so widespread that it's almost like getting us all back to when we were children. I remember that in Italy you would never throw away a toaster just because it broke. You had somebody that could repair it. But that has been lost, and especially it's something that I never found here in the United States. But lately I like to see how this gospel of repair is just like spreading around the world. Fixperts is another collective or loose movement of people that teach each other online how to fix everything. And on the right-hand side, you see a beautiful installation, pop-up event that happened in 2014 in Milan during the Salone, during Design Week. Martino Gamper organized these repair shops just outside of the Rinascente. There was one that was for furniture, for caning furniture. Another one was for bicycles. You could bring your own broken chairs and have them fix their broken bicycles. It was quite beautiful in the most elegant square, not the most elegant, the most well-known square in Milan. And next to one of the most elegant stores, it was quite of a declaration of a statement about the world that we live in. Similarly, many designers are trying to integrate organic materials in what they do. Mushroom mycelium, the kind of filament that enables mushrooms to attach themselves to the trunks of tree, has become a real superstar of design. You see here some boots that are supposed to be boots for a Mars mission that are made of mushroom mycelium and that can grow also other tools on the way to Mars. It's kind of speculative, of course, but it's also possible because mushroom mycelium is really employed. And this is a pavilion that is made using actually silkworms. And that sound that you heard was the sound, the amplified sound of the silkworms actually pulling the thread and making this pavilion, following in a way the instructions that the architects had given them. So using the silkworms almost as construction workers. Another way to save energy is also to augment our own body. Some people have to simply integrate their own bodies because they have lost some limbs, like Hugh Herr from MIT or Neil Harbison. Others do it as an elective procedure. But Hugh Herr, who is a scientist and a great biomechatronics expert, is studying a way for normally abled, between quotes, beings to actually wear prostheses that will make us, like, you know, the $1 Million Man, more powerful and stronger and faster. And in the future, we might have to actually do away with so many means of transportation, because we'll be able to fly, to run as fast as the light. When it comes to Neil Harbison is colorblind, and so he's inserting an electrode in his brain and a camera in front of his face. The camera reads the colors and sends the impulses to his brain, and therefore makes him see colors. So it's fascinating what we can already do, and even more will happen in the future. There's also this idea of augmenting your own self. There is a Professor Hishiguro in Osaka that builds the same robots and humanoids that mimic people. So in this particular case, it's quite beautiful, and I will let you pick the human being here as opposed to the humanoid. This is Mitsuko Deluxe. Mitsuko Deluxe is a TV anchor in Japan. It's a cross-dressing man, and you can see she's quite matronly. And then there's the humanoid, and together they have a TV program. It's quite a beautiful idea to be able to actually integrate also a different kind of life in our world that can help us not only deploy tasks that are very functional, but can also be a psychological doppelganger. And of course, then there's the most classic idea of actually building new types of organs for our body that make us efficient, even more efficient. So not just transplant organs, but real substitutes, kind of like short-circuiting and leapfrogging the bodies that we already have. Oops, did I get? Well, also rituals, reconnecting us with rituals and reconnecting us with part of life that we have kind of forgotten is very important to so many designers. What you saw before is the idea of a death mask that Neri Oxman has developed. Once upon a time, the relationship with death used to be different, and death was much more part of life. It has become so detached from life only in the past century and a half, with advancements in medicine and also with evolution of hospitalization and different ways to keep people alive or at the end of their life. And instead, many designers are trying to recuperate the connection. And in this case, Neri Oxman has found a way to capture, using fluid dynamics, breath. And actually, the idea is to be able to capture the last breath of a person and then send it to a 3D printer, so the death mask is really a way to capture the last breath. It's quite poetic and beautiful, and it's just one example of what so many designers are doing that is just so multidimensional. Or to give you an example, these are some French designers that have produced a video game that cannot be finished in one's lifetime. So if you play this video game, you will have to leave it to your children to finish. And it's a beautiful way to once again try to recuperate the sense of time that is missing. And another important feature of so much design is to recuperate also a sense of systemic attitudes towards the world. This is the ending of an exhibition that we just had at MOMA. It was called Items, and it was about the 111 items of clothing that had a strong impact on the world in the past 100 years. It had items ranging from the white t-shirt to the Panama hat, you name it. I'm sure that you can make the list yourself. But at the very end of it all, there was a beautiful visualization designed by Giorgia Lupi, who is a Milanese designer living here in New York, that connected all the 111 objects together and showed how they fare if juxtaposed or if compared to the United Nations goals for sustainability for 2020. So once again, giving people a sense of the fact that every person's actions have a systemic impact is what we try to do with design. And that's why the white t-shirt in its simplicity and ubiquity is an example of the kind of design that has tremendous impact on the world, and the kind of design that needs to be communicated to people to have so much impact. So in other words, next year's Broken Nature will be an attempt to go from the global to the individual, from the cosmic to the microbic, and from the complex to the very simple, and show people that the world is a whole system and that the impact that every individual has is important, so as to try and change mentalities in order to change behaviors. I hope that you will all be able to follow us. We have actually launched today a new website that will show in a very transparent way the process of curating this Triennale. And I hope that you will also participate by also using social media. We have also an Instagram that also was launched today. And we will try to keep the conversation going with everyone. So thank you very much. And now I'm gonna
both for your amazing presentations. I just want to ask a couple questions before we open up the floor to the audience. Mario, I know you didn't explicitly speak about the Biennale, but I would like to bring the conversation back to the Triennale and the Biennale because I see a lot of overlapping between both your projects. You both spoke about building bridges and making connections between disciplines, but I think that we also need to speak about, and you both hinted at that, about making connections not only between the disciplines but also between the disciplines and social issues that exist, and you know, looking at the issue of the environment as one holistic global problem. And Mario, you spoke about the international conventions, and I'm just wondering if it is possible for events like the Triennale and the Biennale to kind of fill the shoes of of these international conventions, and you know, fill the gaps of when, you know, they failed or they did not really reach their full potential. And that brings me to my other question, is whether you both see, what are the opportunities that you both see in, for events like the Triennale and the Biennale, but also the challenges and the risks that they face and they pose. Start.
A lot of questions. I'll try to remember the question. Well, yeah, what I'm saying, and then connecting what Paola said on your presentation, is, of course, it's not only architecture and engineer. No? It's splitting competence, creating more difficult language and discussion between the two disciplines. No? Because in the past, this thing was one thing, no? And also arts and others discipline was all together. There's a sort of a humanistic point of view. Buildings are not a technical thing. It's not only a technical thing. It's about the vision. It's about representing us, no? And back to the Biennale. Biennale this year is dedicated to the internal area of Italy. Italy is not only cities, no? Big city. We don't have big city in Italy. You know, it's a little joke, but it's a 10 metropolitan city in Europe and 15 in Italy. So, you know, there's a problem of definition of what is metropolis, you know? So we don't really have a big city, you know? But what we had is, we have a network of cities. If you know, Italy was defined as the country of 1,000 cities, and every city was a state. Just to give you the idea of a character of Italians, no? Everybody was a state and defend their cultures and their difference. No? So But this is not only in the major city. It's only this network comes from the Apennines, from the north, and arrive to Sicily and Sardinia. No? So just to tell you some number, the 60% of the territory, Italian territory, are not cities. So it's a quite important area. No? And also in the small city, in the past, was contained the DNA of Italy. No? It's just to give a little example, but the perspective was found by Piero della Francesca in San Sepolcro, in the middle of nowhere in Italy. No? So the little city was containing also the innovation and the culture. So it's a completely different relationship between city and territory, cultures and economy than other countries. You know, other countries like France or England have a big concentration in one or two cities. Italy is different, and Chinese come to Italy to study the economy of Italy because they don't understand why the Ferrari cars is made in this little village of Fiorano, no? In the middle of nowhere. Then it's a little village. They make the best and the most beautiful cars in the world. So, because it's tradition of innovation and in small city and containing this knowledge in a small area. And this area is producing architecture, cultures, economy, relation with agriculture. So it's a very complex model. So that's what I'm trying to explain in this Biennale. You know. Italy is a different country. It's complex. It's not only at one definition. And also, it's an amazing story. You know, I'm working with 5 young architects in 5 very fragile points of Italy. You know, one is between Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna. Is an area close to Cesena. Was the most beautiful forest of Italy. You know? The people from Pisa, from the Republic of Pisa, 500 years ago, they traveled into Pisa to this forest to find the wood to make the ship, because it was the best wood they can find in Italy. And it's a Camaldolese community made 1,000 years ago. They just take care about the forest. So Italy is one of the biggest production of wood furniture, no? Federlegnaredo, and also il Salone del Mobile, no? It's one of the biggest events in the world, and we import wood for 80% for other countries where we have the most beautiful forest in Italy. So there's a little problem. No? So we design a building in the forest. Then we design a buildings for the temporary use. You know, when this earthquake is a quick thing, is 78 hours, you just pull up the tent for people, then it's 10, 15 years waiting to come back home. So that's the time. So what's happened in 10 years, in 15 years? Is a temporary architecture which is adapting to the landscape, and so we work in this project. Then we go down in the south of Italy in the area of a railway station, lost in the country, but very important, because train station in Italy is mean in the south, leaving. You go to the train station to leave your country. So what we try to do is design a station where you're not leaving, but you just arrive and stay. Then we go to Sicily, and there's a crazy area of Gibellina, built 15 years ago by the crazy mayor, who's designed to rebuild a village. 25 kilometers far away from the village was destroyed by the earthquake, and calling artists. And it was an amazing experience. I think one of the most interesting experience done in the 1970s. You know? Then it's forgot, building are not finished, and looks terrible. But we need to finish. We need to bring the end of the story. And then we go in Sardinia. Sardinia is one of the incredible place. I think you must go visiting one of the most, you're from Sardinia. A beautiful place in the heart of Sardinia, Barbagia. The name of Barbagia came from Barbary. And it's Italy in 1980 against the, there was some, I don't know called in English, banditismo.
Bandits.
Bandits.
Mm-hmm.
They take people, kidnapping people, cut the ears and sent to the family asking for money. So there was a terrible things. And the government decided to build a big industry, a huge industry. But the problem is building industry, they forgot to make infrastructure. So they built in the industry and then the industry failed. And they're living in the middle of the one most beautiful place, an empty place. You know? So we're working with the villages, with a lot of participation with peoples, and rebuild together the possibility, opportunity to change that place. So it's a trip to Italy. It's like a guida del touring, you know, but see Italy with another point of view. So that is the story of the pavilions. And I just replied to this, and I'll leave it to Laura.
Would you like to say anything about the...
Yeah, well, you were asking if Biennale or Triennale can take the place of Copenhagen and COP 2021 and 23, right?
The Paris Convention.
Yeah, the Paris Convention. I think that in society there's governments and then there's citizens, and efforts have to come from both sides. So even though one might think that governments are superfluous and actually sometimes are in the way, still they need to do their part, which is to legislate, even though they waste a lot of time. But I believe that without changing citizens' attitudes, governments might keep on running on empty for long. So I believe that biennales, triennales, or even just what you teach at kindergarten are extremely important. Of course, I don't know how many people go to the biennale or to the triennale. 300,000, right? So you'll touch 300,000, me even less. No, you know, yeah, same thing in Milan, etc. But it's a viral reaction. You know, we plant seeds, and as curators, I know that our job is to be as clear and as impressive as possible. We have a message to deliver, and there's no objectivity there. It's about delivering that message in the most efficient way possible. And I do believe that minds are changed by an exhibition. Maybe only a few, but still it's worthwhile. And slowly but surely it becomes the whole world.
Thank you. Should we open the conversation to the public? See if anyone has any questions.
There's one in the back over there. We'll repeat it for you. You can be very loud. Yes, over there.
I was interested in the comment about how painful it is to spend a day in an archaeological museum.
Are you an archaeologist?
And I had the luck and privilege of being able to spend a day in the Museo Archeologico di Napoli in September. A wonderful but exhausting day, and without details, how might, if you had the budget or the assignment, how might you modify that building to have a different or better experience?
Well, that is a big question. I'm not sure able to answer to your question, but one thing for sure is, you know, archaeological pieces like these Etrurian vases, you know, if you're looking at a vase, it doesn't tell you anything. You know, after a while, there's many vases, shape and things, but the story of this vase, the narrative, why they made this vase, and I take your picture about the breath, you know, the last breath. Actually, all this production of piece of vase are made for bringing people from the last breath to another life. So this is full of imagination behind this, and the quality of the shape and the tension to make this vase, the way they draw in some sign and some characters, and the evolution of this vase is the best part of the story. You know? So I think what we're going to do is creating the environment with attractive space. You know? Is inside this museum, you go inside like being inside of a vase, because it's a very strong, very heavy stones museum, you know, controlling also the acoustic, and get an experience. Before see the vase, you feel the experience by architecture. I think something is missing in some museum, and it's only a catalog of pieces. No? I think you go inside, you get the feeling of a space and the noise and what's happening. You know, I don't say in English, bisbigli, no? whispers. These things happen when you go in a very magical place. We don't want a perfect acoustic. We want acoustic that give you this idea there are some little voice going around. And then the vase. I just want to say about Paola is one of the best curators in the world. I'm not a curator. My work is an architect, so I'm just trying to dealing with this new work. Which
You're
is
a curator now, so...
I'm a curator, yes,
yeah.
but it's not exactly my work. But the story of the vase, the museum, is about not the vase of Etruria in the 5th century, but is the story of the shape and material of vase. So you can cross all the history of arts, from Etrurian to Giacometti, to see how the people's working with shaped materials and try to tell something through an object. And the buildings breathe. It's a little detail, I'm sorry, as architects I'm working this thing. Stones are 5 centimeters, and between stone is 4 millimeters. So all the air and the movement and the noise is through this breath, by this little gap. The air comes through the gap, intake and out, and the noise is trapped by this little gap. So the building is also, you go in, you don't really see anything. You're just feeling the material and the object and the light. So we work with Piero Castiglione, he's one of the master of light in Italy. So we try to make these places a physical experience, also than visual. And I think that is why archaeological museums sometimes are a little bit boring, because in Bologna is one of the biggest collection of the Etrurian vase after Villa Giulia in Rome, but it is a room with maybe 2,000 vases. How you can look 2,000 vases? After a while, or you tell your story, or after a while they all look the same. So I think it's a big challenge to tell a story about archaeological pieces, especially the Etrurian, which I think is one of the big mystery of our culture, still a mystery.
I think we have time for one more question.
Many other questions. Please.
Sure. Yeah. No, you. The lady in the blue. Yeah.
If I make them short, but I guess that depends on our guests. But can I ask 2 questions? One for each of you.
Yes, sure.
There. Yeah.
Paola, your presentation started with natural landscapes that had outlived many civilizations, and a question about how the things we design might communicate our civilization when we are long gone. But then the presentation ended with sort of the merging of biological and human systems. Is that progression intentional? Do you see the solution to broken nature as coming back in touch with humans, or something that can only happen when, heaven forbid, we are?
No, I see it as a progression. I still think we will become extinct, but I think that design will design a more elegant ending, so we will be better remembered. I just think, no matter what, we need to do better, not because we will survive forever, but because we care, because we have respect for ourselves and for each other. So I believe that broken nature, the response to broken nature is respect, and respect is manifested by many different forms, but also good design and just more care for the world and for ourselves.
Thank you. My second question is a selfish one. I'm an architect as well, and I'm always curious about method or what inspires you. Mario, you spoke about atmosphere and physical experiences in the image of Pinocchio or in the Whisper of the Vase. You also showed formal references of the hay bale, of the inside of a vase, and you also spoke about the reconciling the architect and the engineer. You also looking to optimize. If you could summarize your approach when you go to design something, what would it? Or perhaps there is not one.
No, sometimes there's no answer. Sometimes I try to convince myself there's not I cannot explain everything. Like why we think about Pinocchio, I don't know. We think about Pinocchio. That's it. And but for the vase, I was very inspired by our director of Museum of Cerveteri. I met him, and he's very focused on that period of time, no? It's very concentrated. And he tells me so many stories. Then help me to understand what will be the space for all these things, no? And I think working with specialists is interesting until you not become a specialist, but they sort of focus on their things, then make me so excited, because they tell me some detailed things, then make me the opportunity to re-elaborating. I'm not starting from myself, I'm starting to talk with the others. No? And I'm always saying, engineer, I'm working with engineer, and I really appreciated the work of engineer, but sometimes they say a very interesting thing and they don't know that. Because this is important, because they tell me something that they think is normal, and for me it's not. Like I was working in a project with a very complicated project for EC about how to cool buildings with no air conditioning. So I think it's a very boring question, but interesting. But the engineer told me how the dimension of the drop of water when changed state by liquid to gas. You think that's okay. But he told me the story about this process. Then I said, oh wow, then we can think about how I can design a building related to this phenomenon. And this phenomenon is very clear, and then if you follow that, you can design a very specific thing. So I like work with people then give a lot of information and then transforming that in design or something else. No? So, and then after many years of work, I think the connection in your brain is coming very complex. You don't know where they come from, but they come from because we are talking with you today, and tomorrow maybe this mask with a breath make me some very great idea how to make a building.